Hi, good afternoon and good morning to everybody here. This is an exciting day for us because we are pleased to host one of our new webinar and podcast series with some dear friends of ours from Europe. We have on the line Kirsten Dunlop and then Ben Honan from Climate KIC, and they're going to be talking about cross-border opportunities and the EU innovation perspectives on AI, farming, and critical minerals. So Kirsten's the CEO and Ben's the investment lead. And this is the leading European Union climate innovation agency for cross-border discussions on the EU. And they work across different sectors, different industries, and they do a lot of different things. But what gets me most excited is that how do you look at leveraging Europe as both a commercialization and an investment partner? So I know a lot of you guys are active investors and are active innovators looking at the opportunities here. So we will open it up for a Q&A, and we already did get a lot of questions from folks already submitted. But just if you have questions at the end, we will do that. But I'm gonna, without further ado, really kick it off to Ben and Kirsten. I know Kirsten's been working on a lot of different initiatives today, and we don't want to take away too much of our time, given there's a lot going on right before the holiday season. So Ben and Kirsten, if you want to quickly introduce yourselves, talk about who you guys are, and then I know you guys were going to do more of a fireside chat between the two of you. Why don't we kick it off that way?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vikram, and lovely to meet virtually everybody this evening or this morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name's Kirsten. I have been with the organization Climate KIC. The KIC stands for Knowledge Innovation Community. We'll explain a little bit about what we are and who we are. I've been here in this role for 9 years. I currently live in the Netherlands and have a background in financial services, in finance, banking, and insurance, with a focus predominantly on large-scale innovation of the industry model in response to our anticipation of major shifts in the world and where those risks in the form of, say, AI and climate, genetics, and so on, might also open up significant investment opportunities. So it's been a lot of my history before I came to this organization, investing a lot of that then in what it is that the organization does to build the market for sustainability and for green technology and green investment. And I will pass to Ben.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm the investment lead at Climate KIC. I've been here 7 years now, working on investing in startups and on financial innovation partnerships with governments as well. Quite interested to share with you today some EU innovation and investment opportunities. And I guess as a little bit of a story, I started my career back in 2011 in Australia when there was a so-called summer of disasters. There was a bushfire, a flood, a cyclone, and a hailstorm all on the same day. So that's what really brought me to climate change and climate action, and how I ended up here in Amsterdam working on climate innovation, trying to look for a way through the puzzle. And I guess we can dive into the slides, right, Kirsten?
Yeah, let's go. So we've got 2 parts to this, and then some space for questions and wonders and curiosities. So the first part, well, actually, maybe I'll describe it in 3 parts. That might be easier. The first part is just a little bit of scene setting. I am literally just back from Brazil. Spent 3 weeks at the pre-COP, the Conference of the Parties, which is the global annual process negotiating how we are going to transition the global economy. And then 2 weeks in here, where that's the entrance where you see on the screen there, to the main negotiations. And most importantly, actually, because this year that was very, very much what it was about, the largest global trade fair on climate innovation and business models, sustainable business models and sustainable investing. So actually particularly intense and very, very active environment in which to examine what's happening in the world. Ben, you're going to move the slides, right? Or can I? I think I can do it. Yeah, I might be able to do it myself. I can. Awesome. So I just want to give a little bit of scene setting for what you'll hear from us. We're an organization, I'll explain a little bit our specific position in the world, but we're an organization that was created 15 years ago with an explicit mandate to build the field of climate entrepreneurship, venture building, education, and climate action through innovation as part of the solution. We orient ourselves very strongly to an understanding of from scientific research and its evolutions, understanding what is the scale of the risk that our economies face and our societies, and therefore what is the scale and the speed of action that is needed, because that gives us, if you like, design input to the way in which we both foster and incubate and accelerate solutions, the way in which we guide investment, and the way in which we act on the ground with cities and regions and industry value chains. So one of the important things coming from the last month was the convergence of a lot of research that has been working for some time to look at leveraging a lot of the AI capabilities now possible in the world to really look at modeling together some of the combinatory effects of land use degradation, breakdown in biodiversity, pollution like plastics and PFAS, and the ongoing warming of the planet. And when you start to correlate and put those combinations together, you get some very, very, very uncomfortable scenarios in terms of what we're facing globally. Europe is the fastest warming continent, so 3 degrees of overall warming at this stage is what we will be expecting by the end of this century, which is 5 degrees on land and 8 degrees in cities. And much of the scientific evidence and the presence at COP was very loudly really naming, if we are in a politics of overshoot now, which also is going to need to condition the way in which we design and think about solutions and what it is that we incubate and accelerate fast. And that means that we're overshooting well beyond 1.5 degrees, which was agreed globally as a relatively safe or safe-ish operating space. Once we get beyond that, where, as you can see from that diagram, we're in spaces that are really very significant, particularly where they implicate Earth systems tipping points. So natural systems like the Amazon forest that absorbs carbon, or the North Atlantic Oscillation, which ensures that warm water comes to the west coast of the US and to Europe and basically makes the US and Europe temperate places or largely temperate places to live. So we're now seeing a very, very rapid advance of changes in those systems, which will come with a lot of economic destruction as well as societal destruction. So there's strong messages basically saying, if you add up what everybody is trying to do, it gets to 5% reduction in emissions. We actually need 5% reduction in emissions globally every single year. And we need to be absolute fossil fuel zero by 2040 if we're going to correct the overshoot. So that was a pretty strong set of messages continuously. Obviously, if you go to the next slide, not necessarily intersecting comfortably with a lot of the discussions and the political negotiations. So one of the interesting outcomes has been really actually a massive bifurcation between a global negotiations not agreeing to fossil fuel phase out or an accelerated move forward with climate solutions and market development of climate solutions, but stalling very strongly on not wanting to commit to that. And some countries breaking away, actually quite a large number of countries breaking away to convene. The Netherlands will be partnering with Colombia to convene the first fossil fuel phase out discussions that explicitly build a roadmap. And the Brazilian presidency has committed formally to breaking out of the process and committing to a roadmap to fossil fuel phase out and deforestation phase out, which in essence, if you turn it into an investment prospectus logic, is where a lot of new opportunities for solutions development will go, because these are also part of PNR's expansion markets for alternatives and for new solutions. So what's relevant to that is how it's affecting Europe and how the general context is affecting Europe. Europe was playing a leading role in Brazil, arguing strongly for the importance of fossil fuel phase out and for a shift in markets, but its domestic environment is in a very mixed situation. There was a decision during that same week in COP to roll back some of the reporting requirements, sustainability requirements and compliance requirements for European businesses, particularly for smaller businesses, and concentrate on large businesses. So that looks like it has been framed as being positive. It is not actually, when you get behind the scenes and you talk with industry and investors and business, it's actually creating a lot of confusion. It is largely understood to be a move that is trying to minimize the risk that the tariffs that President Trump has promised the US, unless changes are effected in regulation, that this had been a set of actions to avoid those tariffs being imposed. So there's some very, very strong debates at the moment about the rights and wrongs of giving in to a tariff threat. And there is breaking news yesterday and coming through now, a big challenge on what is the legal basis of the rollback. So in the European context, there's a lot of mixed signals, a lot of debate and argument about what makes sense. Europe's position has been to create regulatory environments that provide a kind of North Star for businesses, investors to pull through towards, and to make sure that a carbon border adjustment mechanism is set up to promote that, and investment encouraged towards it. One of the interesting side effects has been, however, a massive step up in trade and scale-up development, investment and business development between Asia and Europe. So some of the sense making that could be made here is there is an immediate short-term kind of crisis of confidence, nerves and concern about Europe's historical relationship in terms of market development, market exchange and investment between the US and Europe. While that is being fought out, both with political moves at the surface, underpinning or underlying discontents and kind of force back lobbying and legal challenges, in the parallel, a number of shifts are happening in terms of the direction of where investment, trade, business development and partnerships are going. And in particular, Europe is stepping up strongly its partnerships with Asia and with Latin America. So this is something to think about in terms of global, essentially what is being discussed as ecological corridors, leveraging the European precedent around sustainability and biodiversity legislation, and looking for ways in which that then encourages opportunities for growing new markets and new development with different geopolitical configurations. So what we wanted to present is a couple of snapshots. I'm going to talk first and then I'll pass to Ben about what an organization like Climate KIC is doing in that context, and how we are creating conditions for investors and for entrepreneurs to handle what is happening, and kind of move within it from a more seizing the opportunity of these conditions and circumstances. So just some words on Climate KIC itself. We're 15 years old. You could think of us as a spin-off from the European Commission. We've always been an independent structure, but we were birthed by the European Commission with an objective to create the conditions for incubation and acceleration of climate solutions, for enhanced or accelerated education of entrepreneurs and climate actors in civic society, in cities, in regions, but in businesses, also in industry and in universities. And we have worked from the get-go in 2010, not only with industry and with research on tech transfer and early stage research and development, much of which has kind of fed through to running at a certain point in 2016, 32 accelerators across Europe, and half of the Forbes 30 under 30 coming from Climate KIC. But we've also worked in parallel a lot with cities, regions, and at some stage in varying scales with countries, with national governments, bringing these worlds together on solutions development, incubation, and venture development, education of entrepreneurs, education of decision makers, and with the kind of demand, if you think of that as supply, with the demand for those solutions. So we are increasingly, and our work for the last 8 years or so has been really working in a space of market making and supply and demand matching, so that a lot of the scale-ups are finding organic growth and real economy growth possibilities and investment that follows through as they are able to place themselves in a context of large-scale transformation efforts. What I thought I would do is just give you a little bit of a snapshot of one of those instances in Europe, which is an initiative that Climate KIC leads, as a context for some of the solutions and investment areas and topics that Ben will talk about. This is an initiative that the European Commission set up a few years ago. It deliberately borrows from the idea of the moonshot to put President Kennedy's idea about putting a man on the moon. These are earth shots rather than moonshots. There's 5 of them. One of them is focused on cities, one on regions, soil, ocean, and Climate KIC leads the cities mission and plays an active role in the adaptation mission with regions, and the other 2 on soils and oceans. And what is material about this is that this particular initiative involves 112 cities in Europe, and you see the ones, the ones in this image are 100 within Europe. There are 100 within Europe and 12 on the fringes of Europe, in Turkey, in the UK, Ukraine, and so on. These cities have come through a competitive process, and there's actually another 250 that are in the wings coming through as money becomes available. They have committed to achieve net zero by 2030, which means acting on the whole of the city. So they have committed to achieving net zero as a whole outcome, which means in essence acting on the built environment and everything entailed within it, including both retrofit solutions and new build, the energy system and all that is entailed in that, the transport system, water, waste, food, logistics. So it's quite a significant ambition. It has a significant change outcome in terms of emissions avoided. It involves 12% of Europe's population, 61.5 million people. So it's a pretty big public initiative that is very much about creating the conditions to make markets, to learn and demonstrate what this order of accelerated, joined up and all kind of planned transformation might look like, and the benefits that it could bring to residents, to businesses, and to the cities themselves. So it has some unusual features which are rather useful if you're thinking about investing and if you're thinking about developing a business, which is why I pulled this out as an example. The cities have to come up with a full analysis of their emissions baseline. So they're in effect naming all of the problems that need solving. They have to come up with an action plan for how they're going to get to decarbonisation, which means they also have to name what they think are the solution areas. They have to come up with an investment plan, which is actually rather interesting. Often the return on investment largely is between 16 and 32% projected. And they have to come up with an action plan for multi-level governance so that they can offer the opportunity for business, public and private actors to engage in this journey. They are committed to doing this as an environment that is openly interested in innovation. So part of what they are actively looking at is creating a context for, if you like, place-based portfolios of innovations. This is not financial diversification. This is taking the whole perimeter of Madrid, Paris, Rome, Amsterdam as a context in which one can think about a diversified portfolio of solutions that are being implemented, tested on the ground, scaled, invested in, and where the keen interest is looking at the interdependencies and interrelations. So you don't end up with investing in something which doesn't go anywhere. You're investing in a context which then links through to a whole other set of correlated value streams and dependencies, which means you're in effect de-risking the way in which innovation is developed and scaled and investments are handled. That depends and then is enabled by a very, very explicitly managed process of collaboration across sectors and across cities. So these cities are working in cohorts. Within the city itself, the role that Climate KIC plays is to orchestrate the relationships and the cooperation, engagement between the actors involved, including bringing in the EIB as a major institutional investor, actively bringing in private investment, lending, insurance, and so on, but also bringing in civil society, big business, small and medium enterprises, cities, and working in multiple cohorts of cities that work together on common interests and common procurement. And that's when I get to this. So one of the things that we are really working on now is to bring industry and scale-ups, whole of value chain, pre-competitive, in at the table with these cities so that we can start to piece together some of the supply and demand opportunities. And I'm giving you examples here of, this is just modeling on the beginnings of modeling on just the German cities, so a subset of cities in Germany, starting to do the demand translation of what it is that they need in terms that could be understood by providers of solutions. And this is very crude. It's literally just launched in Germany about a month ago. Really just starting to provide some numbers as a rough orientation for the scale of market for these 6 or 8 alone, or 7 alone, I think, yeah. If you start to then take it further and use that as a proxy for what the whole size of market is for Germany, you start rolling that out across France and so on, you begin to get a sense of the scale and the size of a real economy market, with the advantages of a very structured process with a clear directional signal and a clear set of investment conditions. So it's possible to start talking about advanced market commitments, accelerated permitting, structured procurement, and so on. And that means for us, it's really like playing a game of 4-dimensional chess. We are really looking at what's the relationship, for example, between digital infrastructure needed for energy efficiency in homes, that is the same digital infrastructure that's needed for in-home healthcare, and a raft of solutions that are important for aging populations, much of which is present in Europe, and in this case, certainly in Germany. So you're starting to look at composite value propositions, investable propositions, and multiple kind of co-benefits in terms of concessional capital coming from the private sphere that then can underpin investment. So we are, in effect, drawing back into Europe the logic of the original Marshall Plan, the post-war reconstruction of Europe, and looking at very explicit, deliberate, systematic market development for green solutions, which is why we're using the language of lead markets, where you get market advantages by acting early, having the opportunity to learn, structure a set of interdependencies and cost curves and price curves, and beginning to introduce a logic that is more inherently systemic in the way in which investment participates in this, both the benefiting from de-risking, benefiting from combinatory effects, and starting to look at how kind of correlated puts, if you like, in different parts of this, where you've got a very kind of clear signal, you've got a perimeter of a whole lot of things that need to be invested in simultaneously. You've got the benefit of being able to look at things that are encouraged and supported by that kind of enabling environment, where the correlatory effects can also be financial as well as practical. So that's an explanation of the kind of work that Climate KIC does as an organization that is building the supply, nurturing the conditions for demand, and matching the two together. This is the work that we describe as bridging the messy middle between climate commitments and the reality of where markets are, and really looking to unlock opportunities and make markets. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ben to bring in the perspective of capital investments and individual solutions.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, I guess my job as the investment lead is to try to bundle up all of the insights that Kirsten just mentioned and make them more accessible and readily available to investors. And we do that through a partnership program that we call Investing for 1.5, where everything that Climate KIC is working on, both on the government side and on the supply of innovation side, we package up and then offer as advice and support, and in the spirit of partnership with investors. And Vikram asked me to focus a little bit on what we think are some cross-border investment opportunities, and bring a bit more of an opportunity lens to what's happening in Europe. And so I was reflecting on that a little bit, and I decided to focus on 4 kind of thematic or topical areas that I think are really quite interesting to look at from an investment perspective. So just walking through those, the first area is deep tech industrial carbonization. So there's quite a lot of big industrial players in Europe. Many of them run chemical production processes or steel production, or these kind of heavy emitting industries which are quite difficult to decarbonize. And there's an increasing focus on the role of deep tech innovation, foundational scientific breakthroughs in finding out ways to decarbonize those in rapid order. The Commission has backed that up with a policy they call the Net Zero Industrial Act, which is all about supporting the concept of, it's quite an interesting set of words that the Commission is repeating more and more often, which is sustainable, competitive sovereignty. So it's kind of mixing three quite interesting priorities together and making them all in one concept, which I find fascinating. So here we're talking about industrial heat, which Kirsten mentioned is already a massive market in and of itself. Obviously, steel and cement are critical to every economy, at least, of course, also Europe. And a big focus on grid tech, as most people are struggling with their distributed energy production that comes with renewable, and of course batteries. Not much point switching off Russian gas if the plan is to switch to a Chinese battery. So thinking about some of these things makes an interesting investment opportunity for deep tech breakthroughs. And in there, we've partnered with a deep tech innovation fund called Almanac Ventures, which focuses on some of these more scientific electron and molecule breakthroughs, which I really love to talk about. The second area, which everybody is talking about these days, is the role of artificial intelligence, and by extension, really then you get very quickly into the nuclear energy debate, because if you do the maths on how much energy is required to run some of these gigafactories, then you end up in a renewable energy headache fairly quickly. And an interesting kind of interlude, especially for the US audience, everybody outside the US is quite stressed by the idea of centralizing all of the AI data into 3 or 4 US owned and operated companies, many of which are under the direction of somewhat questionable characters. So the EU and many governments around the world are launching new AI independence strategies. And for us in the EU, that takes the form of constructing 5 new AI gigafactories. Each of them will have 100,000 chips, and they'll be spread out across Europe, and really pushing the idea of artificial intelligence, but applied to European challenges. So thinking about how we can use AI as in a digital twin sense, in an experimental innovation sense, to work on some of these industrial challenges and indeed some of the broader innovation challenges for the economy. So there'll be about 20 billion euros spent next year on this act, the AI Continent Plan. So again, a nice tasty market to look at from an investment opportunity perspective. The third area is critical raw materials and the circular economy. I think ever since that ship got stuck in the Suez Canal a couple of years ago, people have been paying much more attention to supply chains and the complicated global supply chains and where you access critical materials from. And within that is rare earth minerals as well. And so this is creating a lot more attention to supply chain data. Where are the materials coming from? Who owns them when? So the track and trace element is really big. The policy here is the digital product passport, which will be a way for manufacturers to trace the raw materials that go into their products. And the Critical Raw Materials Act, which supports the idea of Europe keeping the raw materials it has through a circular economy, recycling, and a new terminology, urban mining, which I quite like, which is about getting the valuable materials out of our waste. I should mention there we've partnered with a circular economy fund called Unaterra, which is investing at the moment and has some really interesting portfolio companies coming online this year. And the fourth area, which is a little bit this recognition that, oh, hang on a minute, we're all pushing for 1.5, but we're actually already in overshoot. We're already past 1.5. So what do we do to backpedal? So carbon removal is a massively growing market with a crazy amount of corporate commitment to purchasing removal credits over the coming 10 years. And the European Union itself is also launching a carbon removal purchasing facility and will also legally require corporates to purchase high quality, long duration removal credits. in about 3 years' time. It's always hard to tell in Europe, but in about 3 or 4 years' time, it'll come online. So that creates quite interesting investment opportunities for carbon removal projects. In particular, at the moment, we think enhanced rock weathering and biochar is quite interesting, and that probably in the next year or two, ocean-based removals will come online as well. And here we're setting up just last month a new fund focused on carbon removal as well. So these are the major sort of key investment opportunity areas, kind of thematic groups. And because I know we've got a few investors on the line, I'll pimp out our co-investors network. It's free. We encourage investors like yourself to sign up and then you join our newsletter, and we also share with you our deal flow and pipeline on a database called the 1.5 pipeline. And there's a QR code that you can scan there, or you can also just go to the Climate KIC website, and if you click enough buttons, you'll find the investment page and sign up there. And that's just a nice way for us to share what we see in Europe is emerging opportunities in the investment space, namely venture capital, but increasingly city-based infrastructure projects as well. And we very much look forward to sort of hearing what kind of questions you have for us, and also exchanging in the webinar and at the summit next year as well, what kind of cross-border investment opportunities are available. So, Kirsten, I don't know if you want to add any flavour to what I'm talked about. Otherwise, we pass back to Vikram and he can shepherd us through the Q&A.
Yep, happy to go to Q&A.
Perfect.
There's a lot of content in one go, so very.
Yeah, a lot of content, and I know we got a lot of questions that popped in when we first announced this for some folks who are unfortunately couldn't join us today, but look forward to the recording. So thank you guys. I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting is what you had mentioned from a trend standpoint as the different opportunities that I think that you guys see in Europe. The question usually is how do you actually go about, if I was an innovator, it's navigating Europe, right? You have obviously so many different countries. Obviously, you have the EU framework. What's the best opportunity to navigate from a commercialization standpoint? Is it to partner with a group like Climate KIC? Is it to go directly to these companies? Are there certain programs that you guys know of that are actually helping from a commercialization standpoint? And then separately from a funding standpoint as well, for folks who want to enter the Europe market to help solve some of these problems you had mentioned?
Do you want to start with that, Ben?
Yeah, so I think the funding question is kind of easy. That's relatively well coordinated at European level, and it's something that Climate KIC can help with through either our accelerator program. If you're a startup, or if you're a more established corporate, you can also join as a community member of Climate KIC, and also more specifically ask us for help on a specific engagement. In terms of market entry, it's really interesting because the European flavour creates both significant challenges. Like, you can't really, as an American company, operate on day one in Germany and in France. Realistically, it's not that well aligned. However, what you can do from the outside is look at what's coming from the European Union and realize then there's 27 markets that have to solve the same problem. So then you can go through a bit of market A/B testing, if you like. You can launch different ideas in different markets, and you can do completely different rollout strategy in Spain compared to Germany, and just see which works best for your business and the different cultures in play. There's a regulatory reform underway at the moment called the 28th legal regime, so that we're creating a new way for companies to exist. So you won't exist in any particular country. You'll exist only at European level. So that'll be online in a year or two, and I think that's going to be really quite interesting for US companies who are interested to trade with Europe. You'll be able to register as a 28th regime company, and then that'll give you immediate and sort of complete passporting rights. So the legal thing will be solved fairly soon, but the cultural thing won't be solved anytime soon. So you always do need a local partner to shepherd you along the way. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
Perfect. Can you?
I would just do one other reflection, which is Yes, I mean, that is why, for example, Europe has set up knowledge innovation communities for precisely that purpose, to facilitate the way in which, depending on different kind of chain impact or thematic areas, intervention areas, they have a facilitated entry. But there are different forms. There are also different types of support in each market. But I think one of the things to really think about, Europe is also geographically, physically quite diversified as well as culturally diversified. And different solutions are fit for purpose in different areas, which means a very deliberate strategy in understanding, are you offering the kind of entry is a solution, or you're interested in investing in something or building a business that's, hey, has a digital application? Okay, then you are really going to want to get right on top of where European legislation is actually an active passport across the whole member state perimeter. Are you offering something which is more reliant or interested in investing in something which is more about hard tech? It has very, very different physical conditions. And then it's important to understand that the market entry point there starts to be very important. Because if you go in, for example, in Spain, you will have a favorable set of conditions on quite a lot in terms of infrastructure and a whole set of ecosystem plays that are very relevant. But of course, that's also with respect to both physical context there and where Spanish companies play. So there are interesting, it's like vectors, really thinking in terms of vectors of entry. And there are some interesting advantages in the way in which a starting point and kind of a start here and a +1 there and there in, say, France and Germany or France and Italy will open up different opportunities. It is worth being very, very deliberate about that.
Okay. Then piggybacking on that, I mean, other than, I mean, are there other resources you would recommend? Because I think that's the first reaction when I mentioned to folks, and this has popped up with some folks when they saw the webinar title, they're like, oh, I'd love to enter Europe. I just don't know how to do it. Are there certain resources that folks should have in mind that could help them just from saying, hey, these are based on the trends that you see, how they can actually actualize that? Because we have a couple of our strategic partners from incubators and accelerators here in the US that have some European programs. So for example, Energy Tech Nexus out of Houston is doing a lot in Spain and elsewhere. But are there other folks that you would recommend that people should have on their radar or resources? And if not, that is fine too.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly common request where we have a US corporate who's kind of interested in what's happening in Europe, but doesn't have the team on the ground to really understand. So we have a partnership with Salesforce Foundation to look at European innovations in artificial intelligence, for example. So we work with them in partnership, and we act as a bit like the European scouting agency, if you like, and help them to understand what's going on. You know, we have people who are spread all across Europe. We have an office in Poland, we have an office in Spain, we have an office in Amsterdam where I'm based. So the KIC structure that exists is fairly well broad spread across Europe. So I think actually it's perfectly fine to hit us up and ask these questions. That's our bread and butter. And then usually at the member state level, so for each national government would also have a sort of innovation agency or investment promotional agency. So you can also just sort of pick and mix what you're most interested in and which market is strongest for you, and then get in touch with the relevant member state to pick up a conversation, maybe with Investor Now or with KfW out of Germany about, hey, I'm keen to come and play in your market. Are you open to that? How do we invest together? Can I invest through you? These are conversations that happen very often.
Perfect.
And if you're really not sure, just come on holiday and meet some people. You know, it's a nice place to spend your money.
That's true. Thanks, Ben. Another question that popped up, and I'm not sure if this is something you guys can talk about, is within your mandate, but defense technology and the intersection of defense technology and sustainability and climate is something that's picking up interest here in the United States. Also, as it relates to resilience from more of an infrastructure standpoint, adaptation. Do you see those two themes being, are those two themes of interest to you guys or in general? And one of the reasons why I got brought up, obviously, given the situation that's happening in Eastern Europe right now, is that an area that you guys are have interest in, or you're seeing other investors have interest in from a EU standpoint?
The short answer is yes. Europe has a historical block on research and innovation funding being invested in anything that has what's called dual use because of the Second World War. That has just been lifted. So there is now an intention, for all of the reasons that we are aware of, to go forward in an active interest in dual or multi-use technologies that may have advantages for security and would have advantages for climate. Because Europe is broadly still very strongly oriented towards understanding climate change as an existential risk and determined to bring about an economy and a society that is, on the one hand, resilient to climate change effects and understands sustainability to be a leading edge question of competitiveness in global markets and domestically. Anything that is actively enabling investment in, say, security, defense, and resilience that is also sustainable or is underpinned by all sorts of energy that is sustainable or mechanisms around sustainability and resilience combined, decarbonisation resilience, is likely to be of particular interest in the next decade. The Germany Fund is now under debate. This is the under allocation debate. This is the massive fund where Germany has now produced by changing its debt cap. So the concern there will be, given the discussions that actually I'm in the other room here about what is happening in terms of Europe's priority and commitment to climate action, there will be increasingly an effort to square the circle, that any form of investment in resilience and security should be solving the problem of resilience in a climate sense and solving the problem of getting to an absolute zero world. So that is something where, as yet, solutions are very nascent. Military emissions are not currently included in the international COP process. As the world re-securitizes and remilitarizes, that's going to come under extreme scrutiny. And solutions that help solve civil society resilience and security in a much broader sense, not arms so much as infrastructure that protects people, protects food and water systems, addresses extreme heat, addresses and enables ways of holding or handling excessive water, massive storms, ways of thinking about greater social cohesion. Those are all elements and all areas where I would consider both a significant investment opportunity and a business development opportunity, venture development.
And I know we have a couple of innovators on the line who would love to take their technology to Europe, but need the capital to do so. Would you guys invest in a US-based business? And I apologize if I missed that earlier in the discussion.
So you can go from the investment perspective, and I can speak to some of the R&D.
Yeah, technically we can't invest directly in a US company, but we can invest in a EU kind of branch of a US company, and yeah, that's something that we've done before. Usually, actually, we find that because Climate KIC focuses a little bit earlier stage, by the time that you're actually ready to come to Europe, it's a lot easier and to fundraise kind of under your own steam without the public funding that we offer. So sometimes we find that we start helping people and then they figure out, oh, actually I can do this either under my own steam or with direct private investment anyway, and they don't really need the additional support of Climate KIC as a public agency, but it's something we work through fairly often. Yeah, Kirsten.
I was just going to add, yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, there's also the European Investment Council as one of the major providers of investment towards relevant startups and ventures.
Innovation Council.
Yeah, the European. What did I say? Should I say
Investment Council.
Yeah. Sorry, the Innovation Council. In the current context, you are going to be more successful if you have an entity in Europe. Since the current context is getting a bit more competitive.
When push comes to shove, you need one anyway, because the VAT stuff is so complicated. Like, it's way easier just to have a legal entity with some shareholding.
Well, that's a good segue into this last question that we received. Any lessons learned that folks, that both either investors, innovators based in the US should have in mind when entering the European market, just from your experience mistakes that people usually make. And, they always say the ugly American sometimes, but from an investment or innovation standpoint.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see people struggle with is the European rhythm, I call it. So there's a very particular annual cycle in Europe. There's no chance you'll meet anybody in France in August, just zero. So if you come to try to line up some meetings and you come in the wrong month, you just won't get any meetings. And then you'll feel like there's no market there. But actually, if you come 2 weeks later, then you'll align with the major conference and you'll meet everybody. And there's a very particular decision-making cycle in Europe, which American business culture is business decisions every day, move. Europe is complete opposite. It's an annual plan. You got to get to know the people. You got to get in the annual plan. Once you're in the annual plan, it will definitely happen, but you can't move quickly here. It's a very methodical, very institutional-led market, and that can be really difficult thing for a lot of US sort of entrepreneurs who are brought up with that competitive spirit, move fast, break things. It's kind of hard to adjust to that. You do just need to sit around for 6 weeks over the summer. Nothing will happen. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And sorry,
I
Kirsten.
would add one extra dimension. Europe, to hear Europeans speak about entrepreneurship, venture building, you will often hear a language of wish fulfillment to be more like the US. But when push comes to shove, there is a very, very deep commitment to the underlying social contract. So businesses that are looking very, very transactional and not interested in a broader fabric of how does this benefit multiple actors and stakeholders? How is this a long-term solution? How is this going to actually help us get a better society? Might have a rapid burn of interest, but then really run into issues. It is worth taking a long view.
Like they always say, it's always about relationships. That's the important thing.
Yep.
It's a good thing the US and Europe have always had very strong relationships for several decades, or if not centuries. So last question, how can the community be helpful to you guys? Are there certain priorities from a Climate KIC standpoint where folks in the EarthxCapital ecosystem or broader EarthX ecosystem can be so supportive? And then obviously they can meet with you guys hopefully in April at the 10th Annual eCapital Summit and EarthX 2026.
I would kick off by saying we are actually in partnership with FedEx now starting an initiative on urban mining between the US and Europe, and that is capture of e-waste, building materials, plastics, and so on from cities. So businesses that are interested in that, there's already actually a cross-transatlantic initiative. The reason why I pulled out the cities mission work and the lead markets is that we are actively looking to get these cities to be able to build to realize their objectives. So if you are interested in putting roots down in Europe and you have either an investment interest or a scale up that could offer solutions at that order of speed and scale, then this is definitely something to have a conversation with us about. And if you are also looking beyond, if you are thinking in terms of trade relationships, say, Newsom has signed California up to a fossil fuel non-proliferation. If you are interested in how would you be growing businesses in a transatlantic relationship that might be actively speeding up fossil fuel phase out with solutions to some of the hard to abate areas where we have some of the biggest issues, this is a good time to talk.
Yeah, I usually ask people to tell me what their problem is. What's your headache at the moment? Climate KIC is a very community-led organization. We have projects that touch every aspect of climate change and security and resilience, and together with more than 120 partners around the world, we somehow do innovation in every kind of way that you can imagine. So it's just helpful. The most helpful thing you can do is be clear to me about what your challenge is, what your goal is, because then I can help you get to the right people at Climate KIC and the right people in our broader community to make something interesting happen. Yeah.
And for follow-up questions, they can go to the website. Is that the best place to follow up? climate-kic.org?
Yeah, and I'll put up again the little QR code just so people can teleport there.
Perfect.
And
So you can
this is
scan the
my
QR
email
code.
as well.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen and Ben. I know there's a lot going on in Europe, and I know the time difference, so I appreciate you guys taking time with us. This will be recorded, and we will share this with our broader community. I know there will be a lot of interest because of the leadership the EU and you guys are showing at this time. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll get to see you guys in April. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another one of these great sessions put on by EarthxCapital. Thanks to the great work of my colleague, Megan Steiner. So thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.